welcome everybody to the chef's table. This is super exciting. I am like so excited with today's guest. So interesting enough, you guys know how we always say, don't make friends with people on the internet, and be careful who you meet up in person and all sorts of crazy stuff like that. So it's really interesting when you talk about being an internet marketer, who you get to meet online, right? And the connections you make. So we were actually introduced to each other through a mutual friend. And we're like, hey, you guys would be powerhouses together. You guys probably should work to, collaborate and figure out how you guys can support each other. And just like a friendship gets born, right? And when I was listening to Jackie talk about her journey of where she is today, I was like, jaw on the ground. I was like, dude, I have got to interview you because your story as an entrepreneur is so unique in a lot of respects, because it's just like a passion that you have, right? It is something that you said I was going to do, and I'm going to be asking you questions specifically like, how did you get here? But I'm super excited. So Jackie Zuk is the CEO, the editor-in-chief of NextonScene. So it's a publication. She does podcasting. She's like a powerhouse dynamite. Like, I'm in awe of her, just so you guys all know. So Jackie, I'm super excited to have you here. Thank you so much for saying yes and joining me here at the chef's table today.
Katrina, it takes a dynamo to know a dynamo, so thank you. That's team effort, all right? I love it.
Oh, I just love the where you're coming from. So usually the where I start off in all of this, right, is one of the things I love to ask is like, where do you start on your entrepreneur journey? Like, how did you become an entrepreneur? Because it's not like, I'm not sure if you just woke up one day and said, hey, I'm gonna become an entrepreneur.
No,
what was the journey that kind of got you to what happened that kind of pushed you this direction?
So I moved from New York to Boston 6 years ago. And when I moved, I worked for Top Chef. I think we talked about this, right? So they were filming Top Chef, and it was a TV job, so it was only for a certain amount of time. And then as soon as the job was over, I was like, oh shit, like everybody's going back to like New York, Los Angeles, wherever the production companies were from. And I was like, I just came from New York. Like, I can't go backwards. Like, I moved to Boston, got to stay here. So I was like, okay, I need to go out and force myself to network. So basically I was applying to all these jobs online, wasn't hearing back from them. And I don't know if subconsciously that was because I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So maybe that kind of influenced me a little bit. But I was like kind of in a weird place where I was like, okay, I need to force myself in network because I'm not hearing back from any of these people. So it was almost like a forced thing that pushed me to lead to the entrepreneurial space. Mm-hmm. So once I started networking, I found out that podcasting was a thing. This was like 6 years ago. And I was like, okay, let me try this out. Like, I have a media background. I have public relations background. Like, I could talk to people. Like, that seems pretty easy. So that's kind of, my podcast is what led me into the entrepreneurial space.
So like, okay, you talked about one of the important things. So this is actually a topic that I'm starting to bring up a lot more, is that you went out and started networking. What the heck did that look like? Like, how did you start networking in a place where you don't know anybody? Like, how, like where does that happen?
It's intimidating as hell, first of all. Let's put that out there, because I didn't know anybody, right? Except my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband. But like, he wasn't going networking with me because he worked for his father. So he like already had everything set. So it was really hard. Like, I'm pretty extroverted. I was very introverted. And I was like, you know what? Like, one day I walked into an event, and I remember this so vividly. I was like, I literally have nothing to lose. Like, I don't know these people. They don't know me. Like, I'm just going to try and show up, see what happens. And worst case scenario, nothing comes from it. Nothing comes from it. I have nothing right now, right? So that was my attitude every time I walked in. And then from that point forward, I started to really meet some great people that led me on to my path, basically.
See, that's, so was there like a group you went to, or did you just say, hey, there's an event, I'm just going to go to it? Like, what did that first networking look like for you?
So great question. So Facebook groups weren't as much of a thing back then, like 6 years ago. So I went to Eventbrite, and I would just look at like different events that were around my area. And that's when I started to say, okay, this looks interesting. And that's when I started to really figure out where I wanted to go.
Got it. So you just kind of chose different things that looked interesting to you, started attending them, meeting people, and just walked in and said, hey, what does this look like? And here we go.
Well, right. Because at the time, remember, I didn't have a job. So I was like, what am I introducing myself as? Like, what am I doing here? I had this card that I made that said like jack of all trades. And I gave it out to people.
Oh,
And I remember
wow.
it's because, you know, you're just trying to figure out your space. So I figured it out, lo and behold, little later in life, but that's okay.
So you started meeting with people, networking with people, then you discovered podcast. Now it's
Yeah.
interesting because there's a massive event that's taking place here or down in Orlando that's like, podcast central event. So what had you look at podcasting? I mean, 6 years ago, yeah. I mean, I heard a lot of people talking about it. I've been to a couple events myself. What drew you to podcasting?
So I forced myself to a networking event that day. I remember this so vividly. And like when I worked in New York, like I did work part-time for a radio station. So I was familiar with the radio space, but not podcasting. So I met this guy there who ended up being my mentor for a couple of years at the time, but I didn't know that. So I meet him and he tells me all about this little startup radio station that he was working with. And it gave him a platform to meet new people and just interview people and really feel out where he wanted to go, basically, with his business. So he was in the entrepreneurial space and he was like, I think you might like it. Like, you should try it out. So I was like, okay, right now, like I have a little bit of money left over from my last job. So I have a little bit of leeway to like feel things out. So I went, and that's kind of what led me into my business. Like, they threw me into the fire, gave me my own show. I met all these different sorts of people. But at the time, like I wasn't editing my own stuff. Like, they had a whole team of people that was doing all these things. And I was like, well, how do you make money doing this? You know, like, how do you make money doing this? Like, my money is running out. Like, I need to figure this out. So I went to YouTube. I left the company. I was like, I can't keep doing this. This was a great platform for me to start. And I learned how to set up a station. And this is my little guest room area that I have a little setup station. 6 years ago, this is where I started.
Wow. So that really interests me. You just went to YouTube. I mean, so I have a question. I mean, gosh, golly gee willikers, did YouTube have a lot of information around podcasting 6 years ago?
Honestly, yeah. I was really impressed. Yeah.
So what did you learn? Like, what did you dive into? Like, what were some of the curiosity? What did you learn? What were you researching around podcasting that you found on YouTube?
This is so your realm, right? Keyword search, right? So I literally had no idea what to search. I literally started typing in like how to set up a podcast, you know, like how to function a podcast, because there's so many parts. You know, first you have to get the equipment, but then how do you store your recordings? You know, like where do those go? How do you sync it to iTunes and all these channels? There were like multiple steps. And I was like, what the hell is this? But like I just took it and ran with it, you know. So basically one key search word from how to set up led me to all those other things.
So did you just like start buying equipment and then just kind of start connecting the dots, or did you just go live with your podcast immediately and figure it out as you go?
No, I did my research and I did a trial run, and I went to, I don't know if they have them here, the Guitar Center. You guys have the Guitar Center? So it's basically like a Best Buy kind of thing, and they have all like musical equipment, right? Okay. So I go to them and I'm like, I want to set this up. What equipment do I need? This is the space that I have for soundproof. And we did a trial run there. And then from there, that's how I had the system set up.
So what are some of the tools you recommend for podcasting? Because you said you kind of have like everything in front of you, kind of like if somebody said, hey, I want to start a podcast out today, what are some things I need to know about podcasting? What are a couple pieces of equipment or more that I need to really look at?
Great question. Okay, so because podcasting has changed so much now and you can do it from anywhere, they have like remote recorders now, they have all these things. I've had my setup for 6 years. It's lasted 6 years. So I love sharing that, like sometimes spending a little bit of money for the right setup is worth the investment. Okay. So you need a mixer. A mixer basically looks like this. Let's see if I can pick it up. Can you see that? Yeah. So I know it looks intense, but it basically helps with the sound, and all it does is it connects to your computer. So it just changed the volume of like, if you have background noise, if you can't hear the person clearly, it's just a little bit of switching around. So I use that. Then you need a plug from the mixer to the computer. So like a USB kind of thing. Then of course you need a microphone. I have that here, right? And then headphones. This is awesome because I have it right here. I can just showcase it right now. Yeah. And then also, because before Zoom and all these like virtual, like in-person things, I was doing all audio calls. So
Mm.
there's a plug that you can use from the mixer to your phone, and it literally is like a little iPhone charger, basically.
Ah,
So when you call in people, I don't know what
yeah,
the cable's called exactly. I have it somewhere.
yep,
But it's literally just like you can call in from your phone and it connects to the computer before
that's
Zoom
awesome.
was a thing. So those are like my main things that I use on a regular. And do you have an Apple
I do
computer?
not, but I know people that do have apples.
Okay, so depending on what computer you have, they have two programs for editing. It's GarageBand
Mm,
or Audacity. Audacity's been around forever. It's actually one that's better for if you don't have an Apple computer.
okay.
But that's how I do all my editing and all of that. And you can literally download the MP3s from that program.
How long does it take you to edit on average? I mean, I'm guessing it took you a little bit longer in the beginning.
Totally. But there are also some people that you're interviewing and they say all the time, and you're like, oh my God, how many times can you let this be there? And it really depends on the person, right?
Mm,
But now I'm finding you also as the host can instruct to avoid those things as you get comfortable, to avoid the people from being uncomfortable saying, well, all those kind of things. I would say usually like a half hour for
it's not bad.
editing. Yeah.
It's not bad. What did it take you originally to get started? I'm guessing it was like a couple of hours, maybe
Oh my
editing in the
God.
beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like OCD. It's like the Virgo in me. So I was like constantly listening, like, this does not sound good. I need to it would take me at least 2 hours probably when I first started.
Wow. Now, one of the things for me when I first got started, especially doing videos, the first time I did it was hearing the sound of my own voice. Because a lot of times we hear ourselves like one way, but when it's recorded or an audio, did you have anything come across like that for you? It was like, ooh, that sounds weird. Like that's how I sound. Was there anything like that for you?
No, to be honest with you, like
Hmm,
I didn't even overthink that. I was like, this is a job. Like I'm just gonna get it done, like because I felt like this was my first funnel to make money. Like that's how I really looked at it. Like this was a business and I wasn't gonna overanalyze how I sounded because I was more focused on how the other people were gonna show
got
up,
it.
be
So
like.
how do you get paid with a podcast? I mean, so we got over the equipment. So you've got this great. Oh, now I do have one question because this is always a question that comes up when I talk podcasting. What microphone do you recommend? I mean, there's a
Great question.
plethora
Great
out
question.
there.
So they have a ton of different ones. I love Samson. Samson microphones last forever. They're great quality. So Samson is SAMSON.
Okay.
But also they have remote microphones now. So like if you're on site at events, like I did this recently, I forgot the name of it. I will put that in the notes for our blog.
Okay.
But you can plug in microphones to this remote thing and they could be regular microphones. But I learned something interesting. So male voices and female voices have different pitches normally. So you
Yeah.
have to get one more for a male to give them a higher pitch when they're on on audio than a woman. And I learned that the other day and I was like, this is so interesting. Like who would think about these things?
Wow.
Yeah.
I would not have thought. I mean, audio is a very specific thing. Like I know, especially when doing video, one of the things that I've been told is that audio is key. You can have zero picture, but if your audio doesn't come through, it's like people are gone.
It's so true.
And it's because we listen, right? Because the visual, we can kind of make up, especially for listening to a conversation. But if we can't hear them, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a live call or been in a meeting and I'm like, the connection breaks up and you can't hear them. And that's what you're annoyed with. Not that you can't see them, you can't
No,
hear
it's so
them.
true. So true.
So yeah, I love it. So now the next question, this is going to tie into this, is how the heck are you making money with the podcast? I mean, come
Great
on.
question. Great question. So, because I have a public relations background and I have an audience, I originally sold it as like a public relations package.
Mm.
So, like, you'd come on, it would be pre recorded, it would be live within 24 hours, and then I would explode it to all my audience. And people liked it because you would get a blog, you would get a copy of the MP3, and it was live within 24 to 48 hours. And with my experience in PR, a lot of people don't deliver that fast. So, that was like a really fast turnaround for people. But when I started, so now I'm more developed. So like my podcasts are $250 for the packages. But when I started, it was like $50 a podcast. And all you would do, which is when I do consults all the time with people, it's like, just do today the show is brought to you by so-and-so. And then at the end, you'd say the same thing and it's like $50. Like you got to start somewhere. And that's how I started.
Okay.
So, I mean, it takes the simplest things, but as long as you can guarantee an audience, people pay for it because people want an audience. People
Yeah.
want a reach they don't have.
Yeah, well, they want to get into other markets. I mean, that's one of the things we talk about as entrepreneurs is where's your exposure agent?
Right.
Where are you going to get more exposure? That's why, we'd like to be on podcasts. That's why people like to be interviewed on television, because it's all about, publicity and getting exposure and getting into other people's networks. And you don't normally get that if you just stay in your own lane and you're only talking to the people you know.
No, it's so true. And I'm going to share a fun fact with you, being in PR for so long.
Yeah.
The TV placements, a lot of them are paid too. So when you see products being shown like, oh, you should get this item, when they do like the gift guides, people pay for that. People pay for that all the time.
Well, it's like when you watch Oprah do her giveaway or Ellen give her, that's all promoted. Those people pay to have those products given away.
Totally. But you know what? It's worth it because they all have an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you know that these people have captive audiences and you turn away at least one person, it was worth your investment and your time.
Oh, heck yeah. So when you talk about how you make your money at this, when you podcast, so you're saying, hey, if you want to be on my show, it's $250. And that gives you XYZ. So you're actually putting together a media package to have people be on your podcast.
Totally. So it's basically like I have a little like introduction that I do for every show that I have. And then I give them my platform to share about their stories, like it's all storytelling and how they became NextonScene in their business or in their field. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
it's really kind of like this, except for I'm just doing this because I love talking to entrepreneurs. But I did have that question, which I guess kind of threw me, is I was at a networking event and someone's like, well, how much do you charge for that? And it wasn't even a thought for me to like charge to have people come on. I just, that's like
well, you know what? You have an audience. It's something to think about. And you can even start with introductions and outros. Today, the show is brought to you by so-and-so, like it takes as little as that. Like I tell my podcast people all the time, like start with that because, you're editing, you're doing all these things, you're giving them a platform, like you should be paid for your time.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think the reason that I started charging was because at the time that I did it, I had no other job. And I was like, I am doing this and I have nothing else right now. So like $50 to me when I started 6 years ago was a lot of money in my pocket per show, So I think that's really how I started to really build on that because it became so much more than just an interview. It was like a full PR little package.
So how did you grow your audience, right? Because in the beginning, you said you started with podcasting, you were doing, a little like $50 to get people the exposure on there. Like, how do you grow your audience and what is an ideal size audience that people want exposure to? Like, is it 1,000 people? Is it 100 people? Do they want, what do you look at to have available if you're going to start charging $250 plus for that?
So that's a great question. So I have lifetime listenership. I have 500,000 lifetime listenership, but I've been doing this for 6 years, right? And I've been doing weekly podcasts on a regular basis. But I think the key thing is like, it's one thing to be audio and share your story to different platforms. You need to make sure that you're on multiple platforms. So they have like the standard, like iTunes, then there's like thousands of other podcasting platforms that you could be missing an audience on. And all it takes is one walk away, right? So I think that's something to think about, to make sure that do some research and figure out like, am I on all podcasting platforms? Can I be on more, right? And then another key takeaway is like, ask your audience questions. What do they want to hear more about? What do they want to learn more about? Like I ask questions on my Instagram stories all the time and I get great feedback, and that's how I know how I want to run my show going forward. And I do that on multiple platforms. So whether it's 100 followers, 50 followers, or 500,000, it doesn't matter. If they're captive and they're engaging, that's what you need. It takes one person. Like I always tell people, like I was on Twitter when Twitter wasn't even a thing like 6 or 7 years ago. I think Twitter's always kind of been a thing though. But I mean, I got one of my biggest sponsors and one of my closest friends from showing up on Twitter and engaging one day. And they've been with me now for 6 years. Wow. So like it just takes one person, and as long as you have that attitude, like if I can walk away with at least one thing from this, it was worth all my time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the relationships you cultivate by interviewing people, I mean, it's huge. It's part of what you're doing also. I mean, you look at a lot of the top stars and a lot of the top people that we look up to, like Oprah and Ellen and all these people that have talk shows. The reason they do it is because it's not even about them. They're interviewing somebody, but they're now seen as an expert or some sort of celebrity because the fact they get to interview different people from different walks of life.
Right. It's the credibility piece. It is.
Isn't it crazy? The fact that you're the one that's saying, hey, I want to interview you gives you more credibility almost than the person you're interviewing.
It's true. It's so true. And I think what I've tried to tell people too, like, because honestly, like when people first heard, oh, I'm paying for podcasting, I was like, if you hire a PR company, you're paying a PR company for services. I'm a PR company, but I'm also a media outlet that I can guarantee more than one thing.
Yep.
So that's kind of like where my differentiating factor guarantees placement, when PR companies don't even always guarantee placement.
Yeah.
So I just learned this through experience, you know.
Yeah. So you talked about all these different podcasting platforms, and there are quite a few. Are there some of that you have like favorites? I mean, and when you talk about podcasting platforms, like, is that like a Blog Talk Radio? Is that like iTunes? Is that like, what does that look like? SoundCloud, things like that. Is that what you're kind of leaning towards?
So like Spotify is the big one. There's a company called Pocket Caster. They funnel, if you go to that website, they funnel thousands of podcasts. So as long as your RSS feed is linked to that platform, it'll sync to all these other channels.
Wow.
But even if you just Google like where should my RSS feed be? Because the RSS feed is what links your podcast to all these channels. That's really the best way to do that.
Got it. Yeah. So, I mean, RSS feed has been a fun thing because even as a blogger, that's also a key element when you're talking about blog syndication. Is we also talk about RSS feed. I mean, Pinterest uses RSS feeds, by the way. So if you have a podcast,
that's a fun fact, by the way. Thanks for sharing that.
Fun fact: Pinterest does allow RSS feeds. So if it's connected to a verified site, you can actually add your RSS feed to Pinterest, and it will bring your images from your podcast, your website, wherever you're at, over to their platform. And it updates every 24 hours. So little nugget drop on my side for you.
Nugget drop. I love the nugget drops. Thanks for sharing.
So I know we've got some viewers. Is there anybody that has any questions around podcasting? Anything you specifically want to know? I've got Jackie here. We're going to pick her brain for at least another few more minutes around what she's up to. And when you guys are contemplating this, how did you come up with the company called NextonScene? Like you kind of mentioned it, that when you interview people, they were going to be like next on the scene for their business, or so. How did that come about? Like, tell me a little about that. That's interesting.
Great question. Okay. So originally my company 6 years ago was called #GetScene. And I found out at a young age that there's something called trademarking and copywriting. And if somebody has a similar name to you, they can threaten to sue you. So I was like, oh, great. Like I knew nothing about nothing at this point in my career. So I was like, but you know what? You learn and then you grow, right? Yep. So I was like, okay. Scene magazine is in every friggin' state. If you Googled it, you would be able to find this, right? So how can you protect Scene if so many people are using it? But as long as you if you put a word or a phrase before Scene, you can actually protect it because it's different. It's not just the word Scene, it's something before it. For some reason, GetScene, there was something similar with the name that I couldn't use. There was another company that was like GetScene Studios or something. Okay. But my husband actually thought of it. He was like, you're all about getting people in the spotlight. What if they're next on the spotlight? And I was like, that's so brilliant. Like, that's so brilliant. So it's stuck. It's totally stuck. And we were in a Mexican restaurant, and one day that's kind of just how it happens. So that's how it's stuck.
And then, because I like it, because I see the image behind you. So there's like the spotlight and a little thing. I'm pointing this out to you guys. So I'm like, I'm picking in the back of her guest room behind the scene, saying, "Hey, this is what she does."
No worries. You can see it over there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, "Hey, there it is." Just so you know. So if you guys see it out there, now you know who Jackie is. You've met her, so here you go. Jeff, who's watching us here live, is going. For podcast, I've used TalkShoe. Any comments or thoughts around TalkShoe?
I've never heard of that platform.
Like and it's like a shoe. It's like a walking shoe. It's SHOE.
That's hysterical. I need to look that up. No, I haven't. Does it sync to other platforms?
I don't know. Honestly, Jeff, does it sync? I know there's a little bit delay, but does it sync to other platforms? Because that's interesting. He's tested it out a couple times, and he has a friend who has over 500 episodes already on it. So I didn't know.
It's like a hosting website. So for hosting website means like, where do you store all your MP3s? Like when you're recording. So I use Podbean. I think it's one of the longest standing ones. So maybe TalkShoe is kind of like that. I've never heard of it personally.
I haven't. There's so many different hosts. When you talk about like hosting platforms, like I know of Podbean, I know of Blog Talk Radio. That's probably one of the first couple ones I was introduced to when I started looking at podcasts.
Yeah.
I have used it to do Facebook Lives. Interesting.
That's cool.
So it does a podcast and it does streaming
Writing it down.
YouTube. I know. Now we're like learning from our audience here. What
I
other
love
tools
it.
can
Thank
we
you. That's great. That's awesome.
Well, I love that too when I can do like a live like this. When I was looking at how do I bring the chef's table to people, one of the things I know, because we've talked about is SEO, right? And I know even for podcasting, it's important to know who you're talking to, your topics, some of your keywords. So, inside of using YouTube, I know that's a big thing. That's one of the reasons I've actually leaned into doing all my Chef Tables lives on YouTube, and then taking this, editing it out, turning it into eventually a podcast. So I'll get with you on that one because we'll swing it all into that realm also, into using it for YouTube. So how important is SEO, tagging, and that type of, I guess, knowledge for podcast?
I think it's a really, really important task, no matter what you're doing online. And if anybody can answer that best, it's definitely you, right? More than me. Every time I upload a podcast, I try the words that I say in the show and the words that I'm typing, I try to make them all consistent. Okay. So that when people are searching a specific name, or like I said something specific on the show that I wanted them to know that I knew would be popular, I make sure to put that in writing also. Okay.
So you don't do any type of like research prior to around like the topic you're bringing on your guest for and kind of look for?
No, that's what I need you for probably. I don't do that.
Well, even not even doing that, you have 500,000 people that actively follow and listen in and engage with you through your podcast.
Yeah, but it's so funny. Yeah, I never thought to do that.
So how do you continue to grow? So if you're at 500,000, I mean, are you looking to continue to grow your podcast audience? Like, what is your ultimate goal with your podcast? What do you see it looking like? I mean, especially with podcasting, you mentioned it. I'm going to stop at that question. So we'll have you answer that question first. So where do you see this going for you? Like, do you want to grow your audience, and how would that look for you to continue doing that?
I think, well, one of my goals is to do more video, because I feel like video is where it's at. And if I can do more simulcasting, so I'm tapping into both audiences, that would be my goal. Like I recently went to Mohegan Sun and I did coverage for like my podcast and all these different things. And, I brought a remote recorder so that I could do both, so that I was able to do some video. Because you reach a bigger audience. I think that's my biggest takeaway. Like if you can do both, you reach more people. So I think that's my end goal. Like whether it grows organically, which I think I'm just going to hopefully assume that it would on its own. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to seek it, but I'm just, because I want to get more comfortable on video before I really build that out,
Got that. Got it.
So I think that's my biggest takeaway with that. Like I want to do both video and audio.
So that leads me to the next question is
my dog came in the screen, by the way, if you're a dog person.
So my next question is where do you see podcasts going? Like, do you see it continuing to kind of lead the forefront? It seems like it's gaining more traction. There's a lot more events now for podcasters to go to and network with each other. What do you kind of see on the horizon for podcasting?
I don't think podcasting will ever go out of style because it's at your convenience. So basically like radio, the reason that radio is suffering is because it's only live within that period of time. And if you don't catch it live, you can't listen to it again.
Right.
Like podcasting is like, okay, I couldn't hear it yesterday, but I downloaded it and I could listen to it next week because it's already on my phone. So that's where I think it will never go out of style. And its biggest listenership is for commuters, because people that are traveling to work all the time, whether they're walking or driving, it gives them access to listen to things that they want to listen to at their own convenience.
So it's listening on demand. So kind of it's really more so.
What it is. Exactly what it is. Right.
We have video on demand. Now we have listening on demand. We're basically taking what people want and giving it to them while they're on the go.
Right. And there's something still so special about lives, but there's something very significant about having access to things at your own convenience.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, there's a lot of times I love listening to audiobooks. As entrepreneurs, one of the things we're always told is to be like, use your car as a listening library, right? So whether you're listening to a podcast, you're getting an audiobook or something like that's one of the big things they share with us all the time.
So true. So true.
Is there anything that you like to read or listen to? Is there anything that you recommend to the audience that they kind of get their hands on in terms of either for business, marketing mindset, or even a podcast type of information?
That's a great thing to bring up. So I love all like self-help type of spiritual stuff. I listened to, there's this girl called Manifestation Babe where she wrote this book. It's called 21 Days to like Unleash Your Money, Babe, or whatever. But it's good for anybody, not just females. But every day she gives you a task of like things to change in your mindset to make more money. And I'm just like, I tried it. It totally worked. Totally worked. I did it for 21 days. And now everybody I work with, I'm like, you need to try this. Like you absolutely need to try this. And I love all of like the secret books, you know, like the law of attraction type of stuff. So I love to listen to all of those things personally.
Okay. Anything that you recommend for people to get like aware besides listening to your podcast? Because I'm hoping that we get to plug in your podcast and have people like listen into you also. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons I brought you on here. We've, mentioned different tools and places they can go for you, but what is your podcast and how can they connect with you to listen in and get to, find out what you talk about and who you talk to?
Totally. So I like to think that my company is a full faceted, like one-stop shop for startups and small businesses that need to get their voices out to a bigger audience. So that's basically what we are. So anybody that's on our podcast is really like a platform to share their voice of how they got to where they are and how to almost share their offerings to their targeted market. So basically if you're in the startup small business space, like this is a place that we want to help you get more exposure. So that's what the whole podcast is about, like becoming next on scene. Like how did you become next on scene in your field? And I would say it's definitely more entrepreneurial space. But there are people that work in corporate that have hobbies that listen and are intrigued by that too, because they're starting these side hustles that eventually lead into other things.
I love that. So you're getting a little bit of everybody. You're getting the corporate, you're getting the entrepreneur. Is there any specific industry that you're talking to, or is it,
So originally it was very fashion and wellness. But now I'm finding, because I do so much coaching and marketing, I'm working with a lot of business lawyers, real estate agents, financial advisors. So like, it really is like all entrepreneurs, like of all walks of life, which is awesome because it's never boring. Like you're always learning about somebody new doing something awesome.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to doing the Chef's Table is I wanted to interview entrepreneurs from all walks of life. Whether you're just getting started, you're in the middle of it, you're at the top of it, peak of it, somewhere in the process. Because it's so interesting. For me, when I first, talked with you, you're like, I just went on YouTube and I started looking for podcasts. And I found the information, I put it together and I started my podcast. I'm like how many hours did that take you? Right?
Right.
But you didn't just do it with podcasting. You also went to YouTube to do a research for your magazine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you actually are the chief editor or editor-in-chief. It's editor-in-chief.
You're right. Same thing.
So, and you created your own magazine. Is it digital or is it in print?
Both. So it comes out in print 3 times a year. I'm the one woman show behind that, but now I can say this year I am really going to start passing out stuff because I cannot grow anymore if it's all me.
Right.
But yeah, I went to YouTube and I was working with all these little startup magazines, and because I had worked with bigger magazines, but unless you know people, and that's where I wanted my company to be different, because in media, unless you know people, it's really hard to get in. Like it is. You have to pay a lot of money and you got to you have to know people to get in. And I wanted to put a stop to that, which is why I started my business.
Right.
So I was working with this startup magazine at the time that I was partnering with. So I was selling a podcast and magazine package with another magazine at the time.
Oh, okay.
And she wasn't delivering. Her quality wasn't great. And I was like, this is not how I want to be reflected. So went to YouTube. How do you start a magazine? This is what you need to do. And then I went to Canva. I make them on Canva and I print them 3 times a year.
That is insane. Like, seriously, I hope you guys are like, your jaw is on the ground, possibly pick it back up again, right? But there is just a simplicity when you talk about, because I don't always think we know how valuable YouTube is to find what we're looking for and the information that's available to us, especially visually, to be able to put together a magazine, to be able to be shown the equipment used for a podcast, to really give you a sense of building a business and doing it through just online education.
Mm-hmm.
So you did a lot of networking. You went to YouTube, got a lot of, I guess, what I would consider free training. Well, it was free, maybe not paid for, but it did take up a lot of time in your research. Would you recommend mentorship? Are you somebody that says, hey, you need a mentor? Because you did mention that you met somebody at a networking event that kind of became your mentor and coach. Like at what point do you kind of transition into doing everything for free? And is it valuable to have a mentor and be, working with a business partner or a business person or of that nature?
Great question. I think mentors are so valuable. So speaking from personal experience, like I don't want a business partner, never wanted a business partner. I think it depends on the person,
Okay.
but for me to lose control of what I've developed completely on my own is a hard thing for me personally. Because I put my blood, sweat, and tears into my business,
Right.
which most people do, right?
Right.
But the thing is with business partners, there's usually one with capital that can help you, completely blow up from where you are that you've been doing all the blood, sweat, and tears for. So that's where it's like a catch-22 depending on the person.
Yeah.
But in terms of like investing in coaches, so when I first started, I didn't have the funding to do that. So really meeting people at the right time in my life kind of led me to that place. But had I reevaluated like certain areas of my life, I would have always invested in coaching, because you need people that have more experience than you to help you get to that next level, and like coaches are so flexible. Like I do it now too for marketing, like ask for a payment plan. Like people want to help you, like, so I think like to know that somebody's done it before you, like pay for it. Like, don't feel like you have to do this alone. And at the time I didn't know about that. Right. So I was just kind of like going into these events and this guy offered to kind of like take me under his wing. So I rolled with it, but that's my advice on that.
Definitely. Cool. Well, because you do mentorship. I mean, I'm guessing, right? You do coaching also, you teach and train podcasting, you work with small business owners, really showing them how to do that. Is that something else you do also?
Totally.
Okay.
Well, you're teaching my mastermind class tomorrow.
So this isn't about me. I'm asking questions because I have people that don't know this. So I'm plugging you. Let me plug you.
Well, thank you. That's love. Yeah. So I run a group coaching program once a month, which is kind of like a mentorship mastermind with people in marketing and media space. But then I also do the coaching for social media and like public relations as well throughout the whole program. And they're about 6 months long.
Okay.
And
so do you do
teaching tomorrow? Can't wait.
I know. Well, yeah, because I that's one of the things that we were talking about when we first met is I get to be brought on because I'm doing mentorship for your mentorship group. So this is the value of kind of connecting with people, because you never know who's going to say yes unless you ask.
It's so true.
Right.
And just like we were saying earlier, like if you can't afford things in lump sum, like ask, like, can we do a payment plan? Like people want to help you. Like it's okay to ask.
You'd be surprised how many people will, if you ask and they say, hey, do you have a payment plan for this or payment structure? You'd be surprised. You just have to ask. Even customer support, even for big companies, you'd be surprised. If you ask, you might be able to do something that nobody else knows about.
Right. Because we've all been there. Like we've all been there at some point in our career. So like, why not give back? You're still making your money. Just give people flexibility to pay it off.
Yep. Yeah. It'll benefit you in the long run if you can build that kind of relationship with people too.
True.
In all honesty, because they see you as somebody that's willing to, it's not all about the money. It's about helping you first, because inside of helping you as a coach, I know that, we can get you to the next level where there's an income source or a next piece to that puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So true.
So awesome. Well, I know that we're kind of at the top of our time. We're a little bit over about here, but I just really wanted to say thank you, Jackie, for jumping on with us. I mean, so you are an amazing, amazing entrepreneur. And thank you for giving the gift of your podcast. Thank you for giving the gift of your coaching and mentorship to the world, and really helping entrepreneurs develop their brand, develop their business, and take it to the next level. Let them be next on the scene. So
yes, thanks, Katrina. I'm so honored to be on, and I can't wait for you to teach my group tomorrow. It'll be so fun.
It's going to be awesome. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. For those of you that are watching, if you guys found love, you guys are watching this live, watching this on on my blog, or you're catching even the podcast soon to come, we'll get that going. Share the love, let us know, and we love hearing from you, and any conversations that take place here on any of these, we'll follow up and just connect with you. So with that, Jackie's going to give me her links, so you guys are going to have different ways to connect with her. Definitely plug into her podcast. If she's somebody that you want to work with, reach out to her by all means. I mean, I actually 100% recommend her because she's phenomenal. So have fun, listen in, and thank you again so much, Jackie, for taking time out of your day. I know you're super busy and hanging out.
Hey, all good. I do want to plug one thing.
Yes.
So if anybody's interested, I'm offering a free 15 minutes. You can inquire at my website at nextonscene.com and follow me on NextonScene on all social media channels.
So definitely grab her 15 minutes to take her up on that. 15 minutes with her, so worth it. You will. Somebody asked me, is 15 minutes really worth it? What can I learn in 15 minutes? And I always say you'd be shocked.
Shocked. Marketing people move fast. You get that. Like, you could learn a lot in 15 minutes.
15 minutes could change the trajectory of your business in just that shorter period of time.
So true.
So awesome. All right. Well, thank you again for taking time with us. Links and everything else will be dropped down below. Give me a few minutes to get everything up onto the YouTube channel, which is our first place we're going to put this all. And then stay tuned for the blog post and the podcast coming soon to a podcast station near you. With that, thank you, Jackie.
Thanks,
bye, everybody.
Katrina.